July 29th, 1944, 14:30 hours, and Major Robert Delashore, commanding elements of the 405th Fighter Group, stands on the improvised airfield near St. Lo, watching 12 P-47 Thunderbolts loaded with 500-pound bombs taxi toward the runway through clouds of Normandy dust. The squadron carries ordnance that fighter pilots just 18 months ago would have considered impossible for their aircraft, bombs and rockets that transform what was designed as a high-altitude interceptor into something the German High Command never anticipated. Delashore has every reason to believe his pilots will find targets because German columns have been streaming eastward for days, desperately trying to escape the Allied breakout from the Bocage country. What Delashore cannot possibly know, what no Luftwaffe commander could have predicted in their strategic planning, is that American ingenuity has transformed the massive Thunderbolt fighter into a tank-killing monster that will turn the roads of France into corridors of death. And within 2 hours, P-47s carrying bombs that weigh as much as their original design specifications allowed for total armament will catch German convoys in the open, turning enemy retreats into massacres that leave burning vehicles scattered for miles along French country roads. The P-47 gradually became the USAAF's primary fighter bomber. By late 1943, early versions of the P-47D carried 500-pound bombs underneath their bellies. Mid-production versions of the P-47D could carry 1,000-pound bombs and M8 4.5-inch rockets under their wings. The German army's confidence comes from doctrine, from victories across Poland and France, from the belief that their mobile warfare tactics can outmaneuver any threat, and from the assumption that Allied fighters pose minimal danger to ground forces beyond occasional strafing runs. SS Obersturmbannführer Wilhelm Bittrich, commanding elements of the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division withdrawing through the area near Roncey, has fought across Russia and knows the danger of Soviet Sturmovix, but he considers American fighters to be high-altitude machines unsuited for the brutal work of attacking ground targets. German forces have developed specific responses to air threats, including rapid dispersal, camouflage, and concentrated flak defenses that have proven effective against medium bombers and traditional fighter sweeps. German doctrine emphasizes movement at night or in weather that grounds aircraft, but the speed of the Allied breakout has forced daylight movements that expose columns to aerial observation. The transformation of the P-47 from pure fighter to fighter bomber represents one of the most significant tactical adaptations of the European air war. Alexander Kartveli, an engineer of Georgian origin, originally designed the Thunderbolt around the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine to achieve superiority at high altitude. The P-47 was noted for its firepower. Its primary armament was 8.50 caliber machine guns, and it could carry 5-inch rockets or a bomb load of 2,500 pounds. The aircraft that emerged from Republic Aviation's factory was the heaviest single-engine fighter of the war, weighing over 8 tons fully loaded, earning it the nickname Jug from its resemblance to a milk jug. The evolution began in late 1943, when 8th Air Force commanders realized their escort fighters could contribute more to the war effort after completing bomber escort missions. The first 8th Fighter Command strafing attack actually came about by accident, when a P-47 pilot suffered damage and was forced down to low altitude over France. He strafed a locomotive during the flight back to England. Major Glenn Duncan of the 353 Fighter Group pioneered deliberate tactics for attacking targets on the ground, recognizing that the P-47's robust construction made it ideal for the dangerous work of low-level strikes. The addition of bomb racks required extensive modifications to the P-47's structure and systems. Republic engineers reinforced wing attachment points to handle the stress of dive bombing, modified the electrical system to accommodate bomb release mechanisms, and recalibrated the aircraft's center of gravity calculations. By May 1944, 13 of the 9th Air Force's fighter groups had been equipped with P-47Ds, tailored for their critical role as low-level strafers and bombers. They had upgraded engines and propellers, and racks were fitted beneath their wings to carry 500-pound bombs and, later, rocket projectiles. Training for this new mission proved more challenging than anyone anticipated. Fighter pilots accustomed to aerial combat had to learn entirely. New skills including dive angles, release altitudes, and target recognition. The 365th Fighter Group established a training program at their base in England where pilots practiced skip bombing techniques against floating targets in the Thames estuary. They learned that a 45-degree dive initiated at 8,000 feet with bomb release at 3,000 feet provided optimal accuracy while keeping the aircraft above most light flak. Recovery from these dives in a fully loaded Thunderbolt required careful attention, as the massive fighter could easily exceed safe structural limits. By D-Day, the 9th Air Force had assembled the largest tactical air command in history, with over 3,500 aircraft, the majority being P-47s configured for the fighter bomber role. On June 8th, the 50th Fighter Bomber Group's 16 P-47Ds attacked a tank column near Cerisy-la-Forêt, leaving many burning and demolished after dropping 30 bombs and strafing. These early missions demonstrated the Thunderbolt's potential against vehicles and fortifications, but also revealed the need for better coordination with ground forces. The solution came from the British cab rank system, where fighters orbited specific map coordinates waiting for targets to be called in by forward air controllers. The first indication that something unprecedented was developing came during Operation Cobra, the American breakout from the Normandy hedgerows beginning July 25, 1944. As German forces attempted to seal the breach in their lines, P-47s caught enemy reserves moving in daylight. On July 29th, the action that would demonstrate the P-47's devastating potential began to unfold near the town of Roncey. Captain William Colgan leads 4 P-47s of the 365 Fighter Group on an armed reconnaissance mission east of Roncey, when his wingman spots movement below through broken clouds. Colgan banks his Thunderbolt and descends through 5,000 feet to investigate. What he sees makes him immediately radio for every available aircraft. A massive traffic jam of German vehicles attempting to escape the closing American trap. In the town of Roncey, an enormous traffic jam of 500 German vehicles developed. Unable to move forward, these machines sat triple-banked until a US spotter plane discovered them. The enemy forces, including elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Division, 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, and the 353rd Infantry Division, are attempting to move their heavy equipment in broad daylight, gambling that speed will get them through before Allied aircraft can respond. Colgan initiates his attack from the east with the afternoon sun behind him, pushing his throttle forward as the R2800 engine roars to full power. At 3,000 feet, he rolls inverted and pulls through into a 45-degree dive, his gunsight Pipper settling on a Tiger tank at a crossroads. German soldiers scramble from vehicles, some diving into ditches, while others man flak guns mounted on half-tracks. Colgan ignores the tracers reaching up toward him, holding his dive until 2,000 feet before releasing his 500-pound bomb. The bomb strikes just behind the Tiger's turret, the explosion lifting the 56-ton tank and flipping it onto its side, completely blocking the narrow road. Colgan pulls hard on the stick, grunting against the G-forces as his Thunderbolt levels out at 500 feet. He triggers his 8 machine guns, walking the stream of .50 caliber rounds along the trapped column. Within 20 minutes, 12 more P-47s from the 405th Fighter Group arrive, called in by Colgan's contact report. The group attacked this column from 3:10 p.m. to 9:40 p.m., over 6 hours of continuous attacks. For 6 hours, Allied aircraft bombed, rocketed, and strafed the column in what one participant termed a fighter pilot's paradise. They stack up at different altitudes, taking turns diving on the paralyzed column. Flight leader James Macaulay directs the new arrivals, assigning sections to specific parts of the column to prevent mutual interference. The Germans fight back desperately with 20mm and 37mm flak guns, filling the air with black puffs and tracers. The P-47s develop a deadly rhythm, with flights attacking from different directions to split German defensive fire. The adoption of the triple-tube M10 rocket launcher, with M8 high-explosive 4.5-inch rockets, each with an explosive force similar to a 105mm artillery shell, gives the P-47's artillery-level firepower delivered with fighter accuracy. When one group pulls out of its bombing run, another is already rolling in. Pilots report secondary explosions as ammunition trucks detonate, adding to the carnage. A battery of 88mm guns attempting to deploy is caught by rocket-firing Thunderbolts before the crews can unlimber. Lieutenant Colonel Franklin Young, observing from his P-47 at 10,000 feet, while coordinating the attacks, would later describe the scene as resembling a medieval vision of hell. The narrow French road has become a river of fire stretching for miles, with destroyed vehicles pushed into ditches to burn, while others explode in the roadway. German soldiers who survive the initial attacks attempt to establish defensive positions in nearby woods, but the Thunderbolt's bombs blast apart their cover, followed by strafing runs that tear through trees and bodies alike. The attacks continue until darkness finally provides cover for surviving Germans to escape on foot. The aftermath reveals the destructive power of fighter-bomber operations. Ground investigations found 66 tanks, 204 vehicles, and 11 guns destroyed in this attack by the 405th Fighter Group alone. Some sources claim even higher totals, with the 405th Fighter Group destroying a German column of 122 tanks, 259 other vehicles, and 11 artillery pieces. An entire regiment-sized force has ceased to exist as a fighting formation, its heavy equipment transformed into burning scrap metal in a single afternoon. The psychological impact spreads through German ranks faster than official reports. Soldiers who spent years conquering Europe now scan the skies constantly, knowing that the distinctive sound of a R2-800 engine might be the last thing they hear. The technical capabilities that make the P-47 so effective in this role were never part of its original design specifications. The designer proposed using the Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, the largest air-cooled radial available, producing 2,000 horsepower that gives the Thunderbolt exceptional performance even when carrying heavy ordnance. The aircraft's structure, built to withstand the stresses of high-altitude combat, proves equally capable of absorbing punishment from anti-aircraft fire that would destroy lighter fighters. Pilots report taking direct hits from 20mm shells and continuing to fly, protected by armor plating around the cockpit and the engine's ability to run with multiple cylinders destroyed. The evolution of tactics accelerates as combat experience accumulates. Fighter groups develop specialized attack profiles for different target types. Against armor, pilots learn to approach at extremely low level, releasing bombs with delayed fuses that skip into tank sides where armor is thinnest. Bridges require precise dive bombing from higher altitude to achieve the accuracy needed to drop spans. Railroad marshalling yards become killing grounds as P-47s systematically destroy locomotives, then strafe rolling stock to prevent repair. With an overall loss rate of only 0.7%, the P-47s destroyed or damaged 6,000 enemy tanks and armoured cars, 68,000 trucks, 9,000 locomotives, 86,000 pieces of rolling stock throughout the European campaign. German forces attempt various countermeasures with limited success. Divisions increase their anti-aircraft weapons, with some fielding over 100 flak guns of various calibers. They develop new camouflage techniques, hiding vehicles under trees and in barns during daylight. Movement schedules shift entirely to darkness, accepting the reduced speed and increased accident rates. None of these measures can fully counter the P-47's effectiveness when operating with air superiority. The Luftwaffe, decimated by months of attrition, cannot provide meaningful fighter cover for ground units. The rocket-armed P-47 proves especially lethal against German armor. Late in the war, the P-47 was retrofitted with more powerful 5-inch HVAR rockets, each capable of penetrating tank armor. Captain James Stewart of the 362nd Fighter Group becomes an ace in a single mission, destroying 5 tanks with 5 rockets near Cologne. German crews nickname the rocket-firing Thunderbolts J-bows, short for Jagdbomber, and their appearance causes immediate panic. Tank commanders learn to bail out at the first sound of approaching aircraft, knowing they have seconds before rockets turn their vehicles into crematoriums. As German forces amassed for a counterattack at Mortain, then tried to escape the encirclement of the resulting Falaise pocket, Allied aircraft inflicted heavy casualties on the road-bound columns. The Falaise Gap becomes the supreme demonstration of tactical air power's ability to destroy conventional forces. As the German 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army attempt to escape encirclement through a corridor barely 6 miles wide, hundreds of P-47s create what historians would later call the Corridor of Death. For 5 days in August 1944, Thunderbolts maintain continuous attacks from dawn to dusk, turning the escape route into a charnel house. Flight Lieutenant Pierre Closterman, a Free French pilot flying alongside American P-47 squadrons, describes flying over the Gap. The sight was apocalyptic. Hundreds of vehicles were burning, horses lay dead in their traces, and the very road surface was on fire from spilled fuel. The smell of death rose to 3,000 feet. German soldiers abandoned vehicles at the first sound of aircraft engines, but the concentration of targets means even inaccurate bombing causes massive casualties. Some P-47 pilots report feeling physically sick from the slaughter, comparing it to shooting fish in a barrel. Lieutenant Leslie Bowes of the 358 Fighter Group exemplifies the P-47 pilot's experience during this period. He had survived a gash in his skull from a canopy shattered by small arms fire over Brest. Near Saarbrücken, his P-47 had taken a direct hit from an 88mm flak projectile that shredded his left wing root, fuselage, and left flaps. By the end of the war, he had walked away from 4 wrecked fighter bombers, all named, appropriately enough, Blonde Trouble. Despite these close calls, Bowes continues flying missions, his faith in the aircraft absolute. His survival stories spread through the fighter groups, reinforcing the P-47's reputation for bringing pilots home despite seemingly fatal damage. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 provides another demonstration of the P-47's crucial support role. When German divisions launch their surprise offensive through the Ardennes, bad weather initially grounds most aircraft. But when the skies clear on December 23rd, P-47s swarm over enemy columns attempting to exploit their breakthrough. Near Monschau, the 365th Fighter Group catches a German armoured column in the open. Major Motzenbecker's squadron leads the attack, diving through intense flak to deliver their ordnance. More than 115 German vehicles and artillery pieces were verified as destroyed, another 65 completely wrecked or damaged, and an unknown number of troops put out of action. The attacks helped stop the German advance cold, turning what might have been a breakthrough into a costly defeat. The human cost of these operations weighs heavily on all involved. Pilots had to balance the value of the target against the danger that could take them and their airplane out of the fight. Flying low-level attacks proves far more dangerous than bomber escort, with German flak claiming a steady toll. Captain Walker Mahurin, one of the first American aces in Europe with 21 aerial victories, is shot down by defensive fire during a strafing mission in March 1945, spending the rest of the war in a POW camp. Francis Gaby Gabreski, the Army Air Force's leading ace in the European theatre with 28 victories all in P-47s, crashes during a strafing run when his propeller strikes the ground, leading to his capture on July 20, 1944. These losses of irreplaceable veteran pilots affect squadron morale deeply, reminding everyone that skill provides no immunity from random death. Behind the combat operations, maintenance crews perform miracles keeping P-47s operational. Each mission returns aircraft peppered with flak holes requiring patches, damaged control surfaces needing replacement, and engines requiring overhaul from the stress of combat power settings. Crew chiefs work through freezing nights in primitive conditions, often in French fields turned to mud by autumn rains. Master Sergeant Carl Hansen, crew chief for the 404th Fighter Squadron, keeps B-17 bomber nose turret plexiglass in his toolkit, using it to patch canopy holes because it's thicker than fighter plexiglass and provides better protection. Such field modifications become common as ground crews adapt to operational realities, reinforcing belly armor with steel plates from destroyed German vehicles, and modifying ammunition feeds to prevent jamming during violent maneuvers. Supporting these operations requires sophisticated intelligence gathering. Photo reconnaissance aircraft provide detailed imagery of German positions, while ultra-intercepts reveal movement schedules and routes. French resistance members risk execution by providing real-time intelligence about German columns using hidden radios to report vehicle types, numbers, and directions. This information flows through tactical air control parties embedded with ground units, enabling rapid response to emerging targets. The ability to strike within minutes of target identification means no German unit can consider itself safe anywhere within 500 miles of an American airfield. The effectiveness of Allied air attacks forces fundamental changes in German military doctrine. OKW issues increasingly desperate regulations attempting to preserve mobility. All movement must occur in packets of no more than 10 vehicles, spaced 500 meters apart to minimize losses from single attacks. Daylight movement is forbidden except in dire emergency. Units must maintain 50% of vehicles under hard cover at all times. These restrictions cripple operational flexibility, preventing the concentration of forces necessary for effective counterattacks. The German army that conquered France in 6 weeks using blitzkrieg tactics now creeps through the same countryside at night, paralyzed by fear of air attack. General der Panzertruppe Heinrich Eberbach, commanding 5th Panzer Army during Normandy, provides devastating testimony after the war about the impact of fighter bombers. The attacks made movement impossible. We could not bring up reinforcements, we could not move our artillery, we could not conduct tactical relocations. Every movement brought immediate retribution from the air. We were paralyzed. His testimony echoes throughout German senior command, universal acknowledgement that tactical air power has fundamentally changed the nature of ground warfare. The mobility that made German victories possible has been completely negated by American fighter bombers. The P-47's success influences aircraft design philosophy for generations to come. The principle that a robust, powerful aircraft can be adapted for multiple roles beyond its original intent becomes embedded in American military aviation doctrine. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, entering service 30 years later, takes its name and philosophy directly from the P-47. Built around a massive 30mm cannon and designed to survive intense defensive fire while destroying enemy armor, the A-10 represents the direct spiritual descendant of the P-47. The lineage is unmistakable. From the Jug to the Warthog, American aircraft designed to bring overwhelming firepower to bear while protecting their pilots through sheer structural integrity. International observers study American fighter bomber tactics with intense interest. Soviet commanders, while publicly dismissive of Western military methods, privately acknowledge the effectiveness of P-47 operations and incorporate similar concepts into their doctrine. The British, initially skeptical of using fighters as bombers, become converts after witnessing Thunderbolt effectiveness during joint operations. RAF pilots adopt American techniques, though their Typhoons with 20mm cannons and rockets prove effective tank killers, but lack the P-47's range and survivability. Even former enemies recognize the innovation, with Luftwaffe General Adolf Galland writing post-war that the American transformation of fighters into fighter bombers represented tactical genius that Germany failed to anticipate or counter. The statistics from the European theatre provide quantifiable proof of the P-47's decisive contribution. From D-Day until VE Day, Thunderbolt pilots claim to have destroyed 86,000 railroad cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles, and 68,000 trucks. These numbers represent not mere destruction, but strategic paralysis. Each destroyed locomotive means dozens of trains that cannot deliver ammunition to the front. Each burned truck represents food, fuel, and medical supplies that never reach combat units. Each knocked-out tank is one fewer to oppose Allied ground forces. The cumulative effect transforms the battlefield, denying German commanders the mobility and logistics essential to modern warfare. Technical analysis of P-47 combat damage provides remarkable insights into the aircraft's survivability. Republic engineers studying returned aircraft document extraordinary cases of battle damage survival. Thunderbolts land with entire cylinder heads shot away, with control cables severed and jury-rigged with safety wire, with massive holes blown through wings and fuselage. One P-47 returns with over 200 holes from 20mm shells and fragments, its pilot uninjured. Another lands with half its elevator shot away, a third of its wing missing, and its engine trailing smoke from multiple cylinder hits. These examples become legendary, giving pilots confidence to press attacks through murderous defensive fire, knowing their aircraft can absorb punishment that would disintegrate other fighters. The final months of war see the P-47 at peak lethality as German forces attempt desperate retreats across the Rhine. With the Luftwaffe essentially eliminated as an effective force and German ammunition supplies dwindling, Thunderbolts operate with near impunity. Rhine bridges become particular focal points of destruction as Wehrmacht units bunch up at crossing points, creating target concentrations that result in apocalyptic destruction from single bombing runs. Pilots describe surreal scenes of attacking columns that offer no resistance, their flak guns empty or abandoned, crews having fled rather than face certain death from diving P-47s. The hunter has become the hunted, with German. Forces reduced to hiding in forests and moving only in the darkest nights. Supporting P-47 operations requires logistics on an industrial scale that only America can provide. Each fighter group consumes approximately 100,000 rounds of ammunition weekly, requiring constant convoy streams from ports to airfields. Bomb expenditure reaches staggering levels, with some groups dropping over 1,000 tons monthly. Fuel consumption of R2800 engines operating at combat power means each mission requires 300 gallons of high-octane aviation gasoline. Multiply this by hundreds of aircraft flying multiple daily missions, and the supply requirements become astronomical. The constant flow of replacement aircraft, spare parts, munitions, and fuel from American factories to French airfields represents industrial warfare on a scale the Axis powers cannot comprehend, much less match. Weather remains the P-47's most persistent adversary throughout the campaign. Low clouds and rain ground aircraft for days at a time, providing German forces their only respite from aerial persecution. During the winter of 1944–45, entire weeks pass without meaningful air support, demonstrating that even overwhelming technological superiority cannot overcome nature. When conditions finally improve, pilots face new challenges of target identification in snow-covered terrain where white-painted German vehicles blend seamlessly into the landscape. They adapt by learning to spot telltale track marks in snow, exhaust plumes rising from hidden positions, and the subtle signs of camouflaged equipment. The cat-and-mouse game continues even in winter's grip. Major Glenn E. Duncan, the rangy, aggressive Texan who would become a triple ace with the 353rd Fighter Group, exemplifies the warrior spirit of P-47 pilots while pioneering revolutionary attack tactics. Duncan's innovations extend beyond the tactical to the psychological realm. He establishes the tradition of elaborate nose art on aircraft, with pilots naming their P-47s Bonnie, Dallas Blonde, The Bug, and dozens of other personalized monikers. These decorated Thunderbolts become flying symbols of American confidence and individualism, their garish artwork contrasting starkly with the mechanical efficiency of their lethal purpose. Duncan himself would be shot down and killed on July 7, 1944, but his legacy lives on in the tactics and traditions he established. The French civilian population maintains complex feelings about P-47 operations throughout the liberation. Initial joy at seeing American aircraft overhead often turns to terror as bombs and bullets fail to discriminate perfectly between friend and foe. The town of St. Lo, already devastated by ground combat, endures additional destruction from P-47s attacking German positions in the rubble. Entire villages disappear under American bombs aimed at German strongpoints. French authorities estimate over 50,000 civilian casualties from Allied air attacks during the liberation campaign. This terrible price for freedom creates lasting ambivalence about tactical air power among the French people. Villages that initially cheered the sight of American aircraft learn to fear the sound of diving P-47s, never certain whether liberation or destruction follows in their wake. German propaganda attempts to exploit civilian casualties, broadcasting accounts of P-47s attacking refugee columns and hospitals. While most such claims prove exaggerated or fabricated, legitimate mistakes do occur in the chaos of combat. Pilots operating at high speed and low altitude have seconds to identify targets, and tragic errors prove inevitable. Squadron commanders institute strict rules of engagement, but balance them against the need for aggressive action to support ground forces. The moral burden weighs heavily on many pilots who must reconcile their role as liberators with the civilian deaths they inadvertently cause. Post-war reunions often feature somber discussions of these incidents, wounds that never fully heal. As hostilities end in May 1945, the P-47 Thunderbolt's combat record stands unmatched. The Jug flew more than 500,000 missions and dropped more than 132,000 tons of bombs. Some units prepare for deployment to the Pacific, where the P-47N variant with increased range will escort B-29s to Japan. Others face immediate demobilization as the Army Air Forces contracts from its wartime peak. Within months, thousands of Thunderbolts that terrorized German columns are reduced to aluminum ingots in smelters, their massive engines sold as surplus to power civilian equipment. The most produced American fighter of the war vanishes almost overnight, preserved mainly in grainy gun camera footage and yellowing photographs in squadron albums. Veterans of P-47. Operations carry experiences that resist easy description. The intensity of diving through flak to deliver ordnance, the visceral impact of 8 guns firing simultaneously, the acrid smell of cordite and burned metal that filled cockpits after strafing runs. These sensory memories haunt men for decades. Lieutenant Tom Glenn, author and P-47 pilot with the 405th Fighter Group, articulates what many feel but cannot express. We flew into hell every day. Not the clean hell of aerial combat where skill mattered, but the dirty random hell where death came from anonymous gunners you never saw. You could be the squadron's best pilot and die from a golden BB fired by some terrified Wehrmacht private. We kept flying because our infantry needed us, because every German vehicle we destroyed meant American lives saved. That knowledge, that direct connection between our actions and our buddies' survival, got us into our cockpits each morning despite the fear that never, ever left us. Modern military doctrine fully acknowledges the P-47's pioneering role in establishing close air support as indispensable to combined arms warfare. The principles developed over France in 1944, forward air control, time-sensitive targeting, integrated air-ground operations, remain fundamental to contemporary military strategy. Every A-10 pilot supporting troops in Afghanistan, every F-16 delivering precision munitions in Iraq, every Apache helicopter providing close support, follows procedures traced directly to P-47 squadrons, who learned through deadly trial and error how to integrate air power into ground combat. The legacy extends beyond tactics to the fundamental understanding that air superiority means more than controlling the skies. It means denying the enemy freedom of movement on the ground. The transformation of the P-47 from interceptor to ground attack aircraft parallels broader evolution in military aviation philosophy. The rigid concept that aircraft must be designed for single, specific roles gives way to understanding that robust, powerful platforms can be adapted to meet emerging battlefield requirements. This flexibility, demonstrated so effectively by the Thunderbolt, becomes permanently embedded in American acquisition strategies. Modern aircraft like the F-35 Lightning II are explicitly designed as multi-role platforms from conception, their versatility a direct legacy of lessons learned when Republic engineers first hung bombs on fighters never intended to carry them. The adaptability that seemed revolutionary in 1943 is now fundamental doctrine. Technical studies reveal surprising insights about the psychological impact of P-47 attacks that often exceeded physical destruction. Analysis of German after-action reports shows units abandoning undamaged vehicles after witnessing nearby vehicles destroyed. The demonstration of vulnerability, creating panic that multiplied actual destruction. Wehrmacht units report combat effectiveness dropping to near zero after P-47 attacks, even when actual losses remained moderate. This understanding influences modern concepts of effects-based operations, where the goal is not necessarily destroying every target, but creating psychological and organizational paralysis that achieves strategic objectives. The P-47 proved that the threat of destruction could be as powerful as destruction itself. As the last P-47 combat mission touches down on May 7, 1945, the day before Germany's formal surrender, a remarkable transformation reaches its conclusion. What began as Alexander Kartvel's design for a high-altitude interceptor has evolved into history's most effective fighter bomber. The aircraft's advanced turbo-supercharger system, originally intended to provide superiority at 30,000 feet, created the robust structure that proved ideal for absorbing punishment while attacking targets at treetop height. The 8.50 caliber guns meant for aerial combat became perfect for strafing. The powerful engine designed for high-altitude performance provided the muscle to carry bombs and rockets that transformed the P-47 into flying artillery. The story of Germany's encounter with bomb-laden P-47s ultimately chronicles technological surprise and tactical revolution on an unprecedented scale. Assumptions about aircraft capabilities, about the relationship between air and ground warfare, about the very nature of battlefield mobility were shattered in burning convoys across France. The Wehrmacht, inheritor of centuries of Prussian military excellence, victor in Poland and France through revolutionary blitzkrieg tactics, found itself helpless against young Americans who turned fighters into bombers that dominated the battlefield. Former farm boys from Iowa and city kids from Brooklyn, many barely old enough to vote, piloted aircraft that paralyzed the most professional military force in Europe. The bomb racks that German commanders never expected to see on American fighters became symbols not merely of a new weapon system, but of an entirely new form of warfare. A warfare where innovation trumped doctrine, where mechanical adaptability defeated rigid planning, where industrial democracy's arsenal evolved faster than totalitarian hierarchies could respond. The P-47 Thunderbolt's transformation from fighter to fighter bomber represents American ingenuity at its finest, practical, powerful, and devastatingly effective. In the skies over France in 1944, the future of warfare was being written in fire and steel by pilots who probably never imagined they were changing history. They were simply doing their job, supporting the ground troops, and trying to survive another day. In doing so, they revolutionized warfare forever.